you focus? That is the question of today. Hi there, I'm Angela Brown, and I'm here today with Omuugn, and we're discussing how to focus from the insights and wisdom of Omuugn, which is the first volume in a series of two. And you can pick it up right now. It's available online, as well as the second one that's also available online. And today we're going to be discussing some of the different topics based on the all the insights and wisdom, but they are skills that will teach you how to be a better parent, a better leader, and a better person. So I'm going to invite you, if you have a copy, open up your book. We're looking today at pages 245 through 250, and we're going to be covering all the different elements about how to end distraction in a really overcomplicated, overcrowded world. So help me welcome Omuugn. How are you today?
I'm really fine, thank you. It's a beautiful day in Eastern Oregon. It's overcast and the tulips are blooming. And we have lots of blooms on our apple trees and pear trees. And spring gardening is underway full bore here. So it looks good. It's a beautiful day.
It sounds beautiful and it sounds amazing. All right, so how do you stay focused on which one of the tasks you're going to work on when there's so much to do and it's so beautiful and you want to be outdoors?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. But I'd like to start in a little different place. I'd like to start on basically how the mind works. It's kind of hard to focus if you don't know really how your mind works and how it should work. And so I took some material from a book called the Kabbalion, which is an ancient manuscript that was written by Hermes Trismegistus, and it outlines some of the basic foundational principles that we need to understand the world that we live in. And the first principle is the principle of mind or intelligence. And the universe itself is an expression of intelligent creation and how the mind works, how the mind of deity works in creating everything. And so the material world that we experience is a manifestation of all of the thoughts and the mental processes that have gone into its creation. For example, there's the law of correspondence, where as above, so below, as within, so without. We need to understand that when we think of things, we're thinking of multi-dimensional things. Sometimes we live in a place where our mind is just on the surface, and we never really learn how to focus or draw our attention to something because we don't understand really the universal principles behind it. For example, there's a principle called cause and effect. And whenever we find ourselves in a situation, we're usually dealing with effects. I have a symptom of some problem. I have a health problem. I have this or whatever's going on, a relationship problem. There's a cause for why you're experiencing that. And so when we focus and take our attention to something, we should move more to the causes rather than just the effects, because there's always a cause behind the effect that we're experiencing. And if we spend our time focusing on the effect and not the cause, sometimes we're running around in circles and we can't accomplish what we're trying to do.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I find myself in situations like, for example, I wasn't feeling well. I was feeling very sluggish, for example. And instead of focusing on just the effect, which was going to the doctor and saying, help, I need something, I'm feeling sluggish, and maybe it's my thyroid or something. Instead of guessing and taking medications, what I looked at was the cause. And I said, what can I be doing differently that might have a different effect? And when I started looking at my diet, then because I was focused on my diet, other things started to fall into place. Like, well, are you also exercising? And are you sleeping enough at night? And what does that look like when you combine those things together? And so it seemed like the more focused I became, the more aware I became of everything else around me that was connected to that. And I think it was that connective tissue that really started changing the effect that I was receiving.
Yeah, we need to put our attention on things. Sometimes we live without attention. For example, we are creatures of habit,
Mm.
and we do the same things over and over again. And sometimes it's just mindless. And so we need to, like you say, if you have a situation, to sit down and analyze that situation. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I experiencing this? If you have a relationship that's not going well, what would have produced that? What is the cause of the problem in that relationship? And if you begin to take things apart and look at them, it requires you to focus on that thing. If you don't, well, a general principle that I learned is that the more general something is, the more inaccurate it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you can focus on a specific thing, the more you can understand that thing, and you have resolution, and there's an answer to your problem. Where if things are just general, I don't feel well, it's so general that it doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
But if you say, my wrist hurts, I wonder if my equipment facilitates what I'm trying to do, or maybe I should wear a glove, or whatever. If you focus on the particular thing, then you can solve a particular issue, where to generalize doesn't mean as nearly as much. In fact,
And
we talked about a thing. Actually, we mentioned a thing, but we didn't talk about it. And we're not going to talk about it today, but just an idea. It's called Ho'oponopono. And what comes out of that science is that the human mind has the capacity to process 15 bits of information a second, whereas there's actually about 11 million bits of information coming to us all of the time. And so we have to make a determination of what it is we're going to focus on in the moment with information. You walk into a room, and there's the flooring and the texture of the flooring and the colors of the walls and the kind of drapes and all of those things that are going on. That's information that you're not going to utilize if you're there to talk to a person about a situation. So you have to learn to put aside all of the information that is non-pertinent at any given time, so that you can draw your mind to those 15 bits of information that your mind can process. Because there's a lot of things going on in your subconscious mind, in your higher mind, in the world around you. And you have to have a way to differentiate what is important, what is not important. Sometimes it's important to be just aware of your surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about that in a minute when we talk about meditation and some of the ways that we can do that. It's disciplining and controlling your mind. Focusing and putting your attention on something is a skill. It usually doesn't happen just automatically to us. It's a skill that we need to learn and develop and practice all of the time, so that we can master the skill.
Well, it's interesting because I'm in the process of moving right now. And one of the things that I've done, just kind of as a new process for me, I've never done this before, and I just started doing it a couple of weeks ago, and it's kind of an odd way to focus, is that I am on a mission. And so I tend to work really quickly, and I'm in a hurry and all the things. But I'll go out into my garage and I'm going to clear off a shelf, and I'm going to take that stuff and chunk it in the garbage. But instead of just doing that, going out and just pausing for a moment and looking around the garage and saying, is this the thing that needs to go in the garbage right now? And is there something that needs to go in the garbage before that? Or is there a different way I could get rid of that item? Or is there something else I should be doing with this time right now instead of just clearing this shelf off and getting rid of this stuff? Is there maybe a whole bunch of stuff that I want to get rid of? And would it make more sense, because some of it's still good, to just put it next door and have people drive by and pick it up? That way I'm not filling up a garbage can and trying to do that week by week, but repurposing some stuff that already exists. And I find if I just stop for probably like 30 seconds, it's not an enormous amount of time, but if I just stop and I just pay attention for a second, like, what is my end goal? And if my end goal is to get rid of stuff, is this the quickest, fastest, most proficient, most productive way to do this? And by stopping for like 30 seconds and just kind of regrounding myself, what I found is that oftentimes my decision is actually different than the one I was going to do in that hurried state of mind that, like you said, was almost on autopilot.
That reminds me of kind of a humorous experience we had. We had a neighbor a ways down the street who had an old record player console that they wanted to get rid of. And so they put it out on the curb with a sign that said, for free. You could just stop by and pick it up. And it was there for over 2 years. So we need to have more planning and timing involved in some of our decisions than that.
Well, I do want to say that for everything that I've ever put out at the end of my driveway, I found this technique, and this works for me. I take a picture of the item next to my mailbox at the end of my driveway. So you've got the mailbox and the house number, and then the picture of the house in front of it, behind the mailbox. And then I make an ad on Nextdoor, which is connected to all my neighbors. And I say, this is free, first come, first serve, no returns. So that's my ad. But they can see the house number and they can see what the house looks like and they can see what the item is that's being offered for free. And my longest duration of anything ever sitting in my driveway was 26 minutes.
Wow.
I win from your neighbor.
I think you're giving away really valuable things.
Maybe more valuable than a broken record player. I want to say hi here to Samuel Brown, who says, good morning from Utah. Hello, those of you that are joining us. I'm super glad that you're here. And also those of you that are watching on the replay. We are joined by Omuugn today, and we are talking about the concept of focus and how focusing can literally change the path that we choose in life. So I'm curious, tell us more about the process of focusing and how when somebody's so distracted, because there's so many distractions and interruptions in a day, how do you learn to focus?
Well, there are a lot of different facets of it that we need to understand. For example, when you walk into a room, every place, even if you're outside, has an energy to it. And sometimes we're not aware of the energy of a place. Sometimes you're in a place that's just inspiring. You look around and everything is kind of feng shui or shui or however you say it. And the colors blend and everything fits together well. And you feel a peace and a serenity. And sometimes you walk into a room maybe that's cluttered and disorganized. You walk into chaos. We talked before, there's a neighbor in a bordering city from us, and their yard is completely full of stuff. I mean, there's literally a little trail that goes through their yard, and it's like 3 or 4 feet deep in their entire yard. Everything you can imagine. Pieces of metal and old bicycles and wagons and whatever. If you walk into a place like that, sometimes it's just unsettling. You can see that so much needs to be done. So just to be aware of our surroundings is the first step, to be sort of in tune with yourself. We're all a very unique creature. Every one of us has different experiences, different values for things, and we all have a different history of experiencing things and learning things in different ways. And so one situation for one person might be very amenable, and to another person that would be very disturbing. For example, in music, if you were trained in classical music and beautiful music, and someone is playing metal music or hard rock music, it can be very unsettling. People are very, very different in their belief systems and in how those are manifest. So an awareness of those things is really, really important. You have to know what to focus on, what you want your life to be. Do you want your life to be quality? Everything you do is quality. For example, if you focus on negative things, you're going to vibrate a negative vibration, because what you focus on is what you're going to experience. If you focus on positive things, you're going to have a more positive experience. If you go into any situation with an optimistic outcome in mind, you probably will find one. And if you go into a situation with a pessimistic attitude in mind, you'll probably come out with one.
Mm-hmm.
So our thoughts are really, really powerful in creating our reality. So first of all, we need to sit down and say, what kind of a life do I want to live? What kind of a being do I want to be? What is my optimal self? What is my maximized self? And what would it take to get there? That was sort of the purpose behind writing the books, is to identify all of the different traits and characteristics of a person and what would be the optimal in that particular trait or that particular characteristic. As we begin to understand things, we can sit down and focus on that thing and say, this is what I want my life to be in this area. For example, today we're talking about focus. How often do we actually focus? How often do we say, I wonder where I left my car keys? Or where's my phone? Or what about this tool I'm looking for? Where's my tool? We were not focused when we put those things away. Our mind was somewhere else. We were doing something else. We were distracted. And if we will take the time in everything that we do, I'm putting my keys here, I'm putting my glasses here, and we tell ourselves where those things are. And then when we say, where are my glasses? Oh, I remember, I put them here because I made that mental note to myself.
So I did that the other day. I actually had my glasses on top of my head and I went looking for them everywhere and I couldn't find them. And lo and behold, they were on my head. But I do find that there's what we run into called decision fatigue, where there are so many decisions to make in the course of a day that it's overwhelming and often stressful. And one of the things that I found personally in my own life to reduce the decision fatigue and to allow me to focus is to streamline a lot of the decisions in my life. For example, I wear this blue shirt, not this one, I've got like 17 of them, but I wear a blue shirt every single day. And the reason that I do is because I don't have to wake up every morning and decide what kind of clothing that I'm going to wear for the day. Every single thing that I'm wearing is already determined by the clothing that's in my closet. And I've removed all the other clothing except just a series of clothes that look like this because this is part of my daily uniform. And so when I come in from the house and I have keys, there's a little place for my keys and they always go in that place. Always, 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 because it's now automatic. And I never go looking for my keys because that's always what happens. When I get out of my car, I have the keys in my hand. They go right in that little place. When I come inside the house, that's it. I never go looking for them. My glasses are a different story because I'm taking them on and off constantly throughout the day. They're just reading glasses, so I don't need them all the time. Otherwise, they'd just be stuck on my face. And so that is one of those things. There's no system for it. So I am constantly looking for them. And it's a constant decision that I have to make because I haven't streamlined it. I think after this conversation, I'm going to turn into one of those little old ladies that has the beads and it's like a little necklace and they wear them, like a necklace and then they put them on when they need them. But I got to figure out a way to do that because reducing the decision fatigue allows me then to be more focused on the things that really require my attention.
But you really have to be committed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you're in the kitchen and you realize that you forgot to put your keys where your keys go, at that moment of realization, you should actually go back, even though it's inconvenient at the time, and put your keys where they go. Because a lot of times being really, really consistent in things requires us to make that extra effort to make sure that that always happens. My keys are always there. And my glasses are here, and this is where I put my phone. Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, where's my phone? They have it with them all of the time, and so wherever they are, they'll put it down, mm-hmm. and not thinking where they put it down, and they will have no idea where it is. Mm-hmm. In fact, we've had family gatherings at my home, and I've had 3 or 4 people looking for their phone at the same time. where there's a whole bunch of people who don't know where their phone is. It's really kind of funny. If you're going to focus, go ahead.
I was going to say the ability to focus is an art. And I'm curious because you did not just write one book, but you've written several. But this right here is a compilation of your two books. And this required a whole lot of work. This is a lot of words. And so I'm curious, where did you learn, or how did you learn to focus on sitting there and writing something until the concept was complete and then take it through to fruition? Because I can't tell you how many people have a book that they've started on that is not finished. It's somewhere in the works, or it's lost on a hard drive, or there are files floating all over their computer, and it's not focused. But you took the beginning all the way to the very end. And then not only that, but then to take it and turn it into a podcast and a YouTube show. So that requires an enormous amount of focus. How did you do that?
Well, it's a long story. It begins in my youth. I realized in my youth that I would not have time to read all of the material that was available in the world. There are millions of books actually that are being brought forth every year. So I knew that even if I chose a book out of all of that, I would not have time to read it again. So I started actually when I was early in junior high school to start making book reports. And when I read something that I liked or that was very informative, I would make a note of that. If I heard something like a quote that I wanted to remember, then I wrote the quote down. If I heard a combination of words that fit together really well, I would write that down. And when I started composing music, if I heard something or had an idea that would make a good song or fit into a song, I would write that down. And I had a section for poetry things that I liked, and for musical things that I liked, and ideas, things that I wanted to remember, pieces of information that were pertinent. And I ended up with notebooks and notebooks full of information. So actually these books were just pulling those notebooks together and looking at the things that I had found valuable throughout my life and putting them in an order that made sense. I was searching for the question, who are we really? And what makes us who we are? We all, for example, I have a passel of children, and they all have the same DNA, but they're all different. They're all very, very different people. Their genetics, their epigenetic combinations make them personally who they are, individualistic. And so I wanted to know what traits and what characteristics really made us who we are, what would be ultimate. And so I began to research the scriptures and wisdom literature throughout the ages, things that have come down, the wisdom of the fathers that have come before us. And for example, if you take a subject like focus today, focus is sort of a science, and there's a way that you can maximize that science in your life. And so I identified each one of those traits and characteristics, and then pulled together that information from the literature that was available and said, this is what the ideal trait would be. Now I can compare my lifestyle to that trait, that optimal trait. And there are things that I need to change in the way I do things for me to become that optimal person. And so it was a way for me to look at things objectively and analyze myself objectively. And I found that being associated with a lot of people, not very many people did that. For example, what are the universal laws and principles that we're supposed to be following? We have kind of a general idea of what those are, but to sit down and say, okay, these are the laws that I understand, and actually make a list of them, and then compare our behavior and our thinking patterns, our belief system, to the actual laws that exist and how they compare.
So if I understand correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you did then is you started with a particular habit, which was you enjoyed reading. which is a habit. You made a habit out of reading. The next habit was you made a habit of taking notes and making book reports of the books that you made, which is a habit stacked on top of another habit. With those book reports, then you ended up with a series of notebooks that you then compiled. And that was based on your ability to think and reason and question the information that you were reading. So that's another habit yet stacked on top of your habits. So the focus came from repeating habits over and over and over again for a series of years. And that would be akin, if we go back to the conversation about putting your keys in the same place every day. That's a habit that then promotes the same, being able to find your keys every single time. It reduces the decision fatigue, and it's part of your new normal. Your new normal life is you read, you question what you read, you took notes on what you read, and you compile it, and then you turn it around and you make it into something like a book. And I say that that's a habit now because you have a series of habits, and I'm holding up various books here that you've written. Got a whole stack of them here, and I know that there are more on the way because I was working on one of them this morning before we jumped on this conversation. So I know that there are habits that you have created, and it's a series of stacking those habits so that now you are able to focus on the end result, but it's a compilation of things that you've brought together by conscious decisions. Am I hearing that correctly? Am I understanding that it's not just, I think I'm going to focus for a few minutes, but that it's a series of disciplined behaviors combined together?
Well, that was my process. And as I say, everyone is individualistic. Another process might work well for someone else. That was my particular way of doing things and the way I related to the world. And so it was something that worked for me. What didn't work for me is that I ended up with like 80 loose leaves full of information that was not really organized well.
Mm.
And what I would find is that I would find a quote that I liked, but it didn't encapsulate exactly how I looked at that thing. And so I would take quotes and reword them as I would say them according to my understanding. And I didn't realize at the time how far-reaching that went. When I actually took my own quotes, for example, if someone came up to you and said, give me one of your own individual quotes, say something that's very unique to you, you'd probably have to stop and think, what could I say that would be really unique to me? But when I compiled those things that were unique to me, I found that I had a whole volume of my own quotes that were significant to me, the way I would express things. And so it was just a way that I related to the world and related to information. Other people would have different methodologies for doing that. So we should each understand how we operate. What skills do we have that would make our life more successful? It could
Well,
be
one of the things that I've noticed about you, though, is you'll start a project, and many people fall apart here. They start a project and they've got all this enthusiasm and gusto, and then they get halfway through the project, and then somewhere their enthusiasm kind of wanes a little bit, and they get distracted, and they go off and they do something else, and they never come back. And I've noticed about you, when you start a project, you often finish it. And I'm talking about things like you grow some berries, for example. Then you pick the berries and you bring them inside the house, and then you can them or you turn them into a jelly or a jam or something else, and you bring it all the way through to its finished product. And so I've seen you cutting plants that you're grafting together, and you're putting them on a vine or something, and then later there's a bottle of jam. And that's a whole complete process. So how do you complete the process? Because many people don't have, I don't know, they don't value the completion of the project enough to even finish it. And I think I'm speaking not only for myself, but probably for many of us on the call. Hey, everybody that's on the call joining us today, thank you for joining us. But I'm curious, how do you finish the projects you start? Because that requires an enormous amount of focus.
Well, I would have to admit, first of all, that I don't finish all of my projects. I have a lot of things in the fire that I'm trying to do. But you have to decide, for example, if you want to raise chickens because you want to have organic eggs that you know are wholesome and don't have any antibiotics or chemicals in them. You want to raise your own chickens, and you want to raise your own, say, goats, so you can produce your own cheese and your own milk. First of all, you have to stop and say, if I have those animals, I won't be able to travel anymore. Or if I do travel, I'm going to have someone come in and take care of those animals. And it's going to take so much time and so much resource to do this project. If I'm not willing to do those things on the other end, it's better not to start that project. I encourage everyone to grow a garden. In today's world, you have no idea where your food is coming from, or the heavy metals in it, or the pesticides, or the herbicides, or all kinds of sides. It's a good idea to grow your own garden. But if you grow your own garden, you have to water it, you have to weed it, you have to take care of it, and you can't travel as much, you can't be gone for long lapses of time. I know that you're basically on your way to a different state to spend the summer. It would be hard for you to start a garden here and not be able to finish it or oversee it. So whenever you have a project, you need to look at both ends of the project and say, do I have the resources? Do I have the time? Do I have the discipline to start this and finish it and make it successful? Because a lot of times we do start projects and we haven't thought through the end. I want to grow a grape arbor and I want to grow a cherry tree. And if they're not in the right place, when the cherry tree is big, is it going to shade the grapes that I'm trying to produce? So it's easy when you buy plants at the store, they're little tiny things. You can put 5 or 6 of them in a pot. But when they're big, some of them will be huge, and you have to allow for those spaces. So you have to think, whatever you're doing, you have to think it all the way through. What is this going to be as an end result? You can plant your lettuces all close together, but all of a sudden you have to start thinning and working and doing other things because you didn't plant them the right distance apart, because they're going to be bigger as they grow than when they start out. So it's thinking things through. If you want to learn a musical instrument, are you really willing to set aside a half an hour or an hour every day and practice your instrument, learn about music? Are you going to continue to learn about music? Or are you going to learn 3 or 4 or 5 songs and play those same songs your entire life and say, yeah, I can do that?
I did that.
I've done it myself. And so if you're going to learn something, are you going to really discipline yourself and put yourself out there for the required time and effort to make that thing successful?
So how do you determine what items or what goals are worthy of your time? And I'm talking about from beginning through completion, once you've thought those through.
Well, you have to prioritize. You can't do everything. If you want to be a musician and a carpenter and a plumber and have your own podcast and have a garden and raise animals and do all of these things, after a while, your plate is going to be full and you can't do anything else. Or if you keep putting things on your plate, things are going to start falling by the wayside and you won't be able to keep up with all of the things that should be done in all of those areas. So you become a mediocre gardener and a mediocre musician, and everything you do is just kind of mediocre. We have the ability to excel in certain things. And where we have an interest and a passion, that's where we should put our focus and our attention and our discipline and our effort. And we should excel in those areas. And then if we can add other areas to those and still excel, or maybe it's important to, I have learned this, that an important thing is balance. If your life is balanced, that's better than if you're excelling in one area but really deficient in other areas. For example, if you're a really, really good musician, but you're in poor health, that's not a good combination. In fact, poor health is not a good combination with any other discipline that you want to accomplish. So There are things that are just high priority in your life, and you need to be able to identify what those are. And your focus, your attention should be on those high priority things. And if you don't, your life can turn out in a very, very disastrous way,
So
or a
let's talk for a
mediocre way.
second about the average house mom or house dad who has children at home and has a job focusing on paying bills and things that are required to live in society. How do they focus on and prioritize the things that are most important? Because the bulk of their time is based on taking care of their kids, raising the family, fixing meals, doing laundry, going to the job, doing the things that they have to do just to maintain the normal everyday life that they live. How do they then choose what are the highest priorities in order to make sure that those are the things that they take from beginning through to completion?
Well, of course, it's going to be different for everyone. As I say, I had a lot of children. And one of the ways that I did that was to incorporate my children into all of the activities that we did. If we had a work project, we would all work together. If we had a garden, it was a family garden and everyone had responsibilities. Uh, it's taking the situation you're in and sitting down and saying, how can I maximize this situation? What are my high priority things? And how can I move those high priority things together in such a way that it makes my life balanced and harmonious and sort of maximizes everything? And you can't maximize everything, and you don't need to maximize everything. I don't need to have the best garden in my town. If I have a garden that supplies my food, that's sufficient. For example, when I garden, I make all of my own soil. I compost. I use red worms. I put inorganic materials like azomite and zeolite and things that have all of the mineral things that the plants need. And I sift all of my soil so it's a beautiful, rich loam. I have a neighbor who just goes out and his garden is full of rocks. I don't have a rock in my garden of any sufficient size. All the rocks in my garden are maybe like a pinhead because everything is hand sifted.
But
My
what I heard you
garden,
say a minute ago, and I think this is really important, and I don't want us to slip by it without acknowledging this. You said that you utilize the skills of the family members to help you out on those projects. And that goes back to the Dan Kennedy book, The Who, Not How. And it's the who is going to help me do this, excuse me, rather than how am I going to do it all by myself. And I love that concept because that's a concept of outsourcing. And so, if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is prioritize what is important. And if you're not able to get all of those things done, then outsource some of those things to either other members of your family. And I'm guessing other people. And that might be where you go outside your family and you hire some help or you have an employee or something to help you do those things so that you're still able to get done the priorities and not necessarily do a mediocre job by kind of half-heartedly being a jack of all trades. Is that kind of what I hear you saying?
uh, absolutely. But it also goes into parenting. If you're going to be a parent, then you have certain responsibility to teach your children certain things. And so you can sort of be a good parent by incorporating your children into all of these life experiences so that they learn how to deal with gardens and fixing things and building things and being creative. You can teach your children all of those skills, and that helps you to be a good parent, but you can also get a lot of things done that you need to get done by pulling all of those assets together.
I
So
want to
there's a
add
lot
the
of different.
icing on I want to add the icing on the cake to that concept where having been one of your children, well, I still am, but having grown up under your roof, one of the things that was really important to me in completing projects was the concept that what you're doing right now, you can do it better. And you always challenged us to look for the ways we could do it better. And so that encouraged us to finish it and then step back and inspect our own work and take a look at it and say, can I do better? Is this project finished? Is there anything that I left that is not complete with this? And then walking away with our heads held high, going, yeah, I got this. I got this. And I have carried that with me through the entirety of my career. On every project that I'm working on, look at it from every angle, and not to the point where it is perfect, but my goal is 95% perfect. Like if I can get really close and then go ahead and pull that ripcord, I know that if you're jumping out of an airplane and you got a parachute on your back, you can't go all the way to the ground in free fall. At some point, you have to pull the ripcord and you have to let the parachute open. Otherwise, you did a perfect job of falling all the way to your death. But by stopping and looking for that final moment of, yes, I did it and this is the best I can do, and I'm signing off on this project. So I love that you brought it all the way through and you closed the loop by saying, can you do it better? And did you inspect your work?
And we did that. We not only assigned the jobs, but we had inspections, and we made certain that the jobs were complete. And we tried to leave it up to each individual on how they did the job. What was the technique that was best for them? Or the idea was to have clean dishes at the end. And with a bunch of children, we never had the need for a dishwasher. We had a system of hot soapy water and rinsing dishes and putting them away, wiping them, drying them, putting them away. It was easier to assign all of those things and give someone something responsible to do that they could follow through with, teach them how to work, teach them how to be disciplined. And I don't think we ever had an objective to have a perfect house where everything was in place, everything was in order. But generally, our houses were organized and we had places for things, and we would pick up after ourselves. One of our rules was if we walked into a room, we left it better than when we walked into the room. Find something, pick it up, put it away. It just makes life better. If you go camping and you're in a public place, if you see trash on the ground, pick it up, put it in the receptacle, leave a place better than you found it. So everyone has to have a certain ideal of what their life will be. What kind of a person will you be? Will you be organized? Will you be clean? Will you be affable? Will you have a pleasant personality? Are you going to have a sense of humor? All different kinds of traits and characteristics and skills. You can design whatever kind of a person you want to be, but you need to focus on that. You need to bring your attention to that very question. What kind of a person do I want to be? For example, I've run into people who have a belief system that they feel very strongly about, but they don't appear to be a really happy person. Mm. And I have found someone with a different belief system who's just a really happy person who's really satisfied with their life. And I would almost rather be a little off in my belief system and be really happy than to have a very rigid belief system and be an old grump, so to speak. So,
well, but I think having a belief system, I think that goes back to focus. And one of the things that you taught us growing up was to question everything. And that goes back to what you were saying a minute ago, where you were reading books and then you were questioning those ideas and how does that information apply to me in my own personal life. And I think questioning our beliefs doesn't negate that they once worked for us. For example, I grew up with a series of beliefs because that's what I grew up with. And when I questioned them later on, as my life changed and I was more mature and I was in a different place of my life, looking back at that same set of beliefs, it worked for me at that time. But as I changed and I evolved as a person, I was like, wait a second, I'm missing some stuff here. And I was able then to change my belief system to focus on the new version of the best version of me that left those old beliefs behind, if you will. It didn't make them inaccurate and it didn't negate them. It just meant they worked for me at that period of my time. And now that I have changed and I'm a new person, I have new beliefs.
You bring up a very important point, and that is if you get to a point where you're just satisfied with yourself, I'm living a lifestyle that I enjoy, I'm comfortable, everything is really cool, that's really kind of a bad place to be for me because I think there's always something to learn. There's always a way that we can make our life better. There are new skills that we can learn or discipline ourselves to do that would amplify the life that we have now. I think in the design of the creature itself, there's this wanting to be better, wanting to be able to accomplish more, doing things more efficiently, just whatever it is. What if you have the same job that you're doing all of the time? How can you streamline it? How can you make it better? How can you innovate? How can you do things? What we found is that every time a child came into our house, really it affected everybody. And we had to adapt to that change. And every time someone grew up and left our home, it rearranged everything. And we had to sort of reorder how our life would flow. So you have to be aware of the seasons of your life. Like you say, there are times when you're a new parent, you have babies to take care of, and that's where your focus, that's where your attention is. That's important. And as they go through different stages of their lives, you go through those changes with them, and things change. The family's always changing. You need to be focused on today. What's happening today? And how can I make today better? I can't live in the past. I can't live in the future. I've got to live today and maximize today. And you have to realize where your children are, what they're learning in school. Sometimes you have to just unlearn them. You have to say, hey, what you learned in school today is not accurate. You're learning a lot of woke things. You're learning that you can be a they instead of a she or a he. You can be anything you want to be. That's not really true. This is who you are. This is what your capacity is. And you need to maximize that.
One of the things that you mentioned, and I want to stop for a second so that we don't slip this by either. You're talking about living a life in autopilot where you just believe the same stuff that you always believed, or you live the same way that you always lived, and you have become complacent in your life. And I think it's really important because as a house cleaner of 32 years, one of the things that I discovered is when I get in the zone and I'm just cleaning and I'm not paying attention. I mean, I've done it so many times that I know what I'm doing and I know that I'm doing a really good job. That when I'm not focused and I'm not hyper aware, it's easy to, I mean, I've literally cleaned homes where when I left the home, I'm like, did I clean that one bathroom or did I skip that whole entire bathroom altogether? And it's haunted me because I wasn't paying attention and I was on such a routine in a zone that I thought I did and maybe I didn't. And the only thing that saved me is doing the inspections and going back and double checking my own work to say, hey, wait a second. Okay, now I'm focused and I'm in the moment and I'm hyper aware. Did I do this? And I look back and I'm like, I completely forgot to empty the trash. And I was just in a zone and I just blitzed on right on by. And I think that's how life can be sometimes. Like you said, when we're talking about either teaching our kids or the things that we learn or the lifestyle that we're living, if we're not stopping to do those inspections and to stop for a second and say, wait a second, am I still on track? Is this still what I believe? Is this still what I'm teaching? That it's easy to just drift by and life passes you by and you've just lost years. Wow, that year just blew by.
Yeah, and that brings up a point that's important. We talked about whatever you're doing, focus on what you're doing. I'm taking my glasses off and I'm putting them here. I'm turning the stove off. I'm aware of that. I don't have to worry a half an hour later, did I turn the stove off? All I have to think about is, and sometimes things come to our awareness. For example, did I lock the door? If you have that idea and you're not sure if you locked the door, right then go check to see if the door is locked. If things come to your awareness, do it right then. Follow through with it right then. And then you don't have a lot of things backing up in your to-do list or things to worry about. Or sometimes when we're trying to go to sleep at night, we can't go to sleep because our mind is going, did I do this? Did I do that? How is this relationship? I have this problem that wasn't resolved, and on and on and on. If we do everything in the moment that needs to be done, it eliminates a lot of that worry, and our minds have a tendency to wander. And it's hard to focus if your mind is wandering. In fact, you need to be aware of the distractions that keep you from focusing.
Mm-hmm.
There are things like your comfort. If it's too hot or too cold, or you're in a chair that doesn't fit you right, it's hard to focus if something is going on externally like that is bothersome to you. Or if you just had an argument with someone and you're thinking about that and trying to do another task, you can't really be fully present because your mind is somewhere else. So you want to eliminate stress and eliminate anxiety and eliminate discomfort things. A lot of people procrastinate. And after a while, you have a whole list of things that you've procrastinated, if that's your methodology. And you have to worry about all of those things, and your mind is always wandering in all of those areas. When can I do this thing that I've procrastinated? It will interfere with this other thing that I've procrastinated, and on and on and on. So don't let those things interfere with your ability to focus. Sometimes we talked about being overloaded. You just have too much on your plate. It's hard to focus if you have a lot of things going on. You're bombarded with all kinds of information and pressure. Get rid of all of those things. We talked about multitasking. Sometimes you can multitask, sometimes you can't, and you need to differentiate, because multitasking it can upset your ability to focus and to put your attention on something. Whatever you're doing, just one quick point. Whatever you're doing should have your focus and attention on what you're doing. And you should make a mental note of it and be aware of what you're doing so that you have quality and you do it the way that it needs to be done. That was my point.
And that's a great point. I didn't mean to interrupt. I apologize.
No.
One of the things that I wanted to add to what you just said was when you talked about there's so much that it's overwhelming. I want to add that to a physical state as well. When you walk into a room and there's so much clutter, every single one of those things at an unconscious level demands your attention. And one of the things that caught my attention early on was one time there was a little black thread that had fallen off a stocking or something and had fallen on my floor. And I walked in through the house and I saw it on my floor, and I immediately thought it was a spider because it was bunched up and it looked like a little spider on my floor, and I jumped. And then when I looked down at it, I said, oh, it's just a string, but I didn't pick it up. So the next time that I walked into the room, I saw it again and I jumped. Oh, it's a spider. No, it's just a string. So I wasn't as alarmed the second time, but I took all that mental energy to process that again, and I still didn't pick it up. Then it became a game. I wanted to see how many times I could walk into the room before it became my new normal. And it was probably about a week and a half before it became my new normal, and I didn't see it again until the next time I went to vacuum. What's interesting about the story is every single time we walk into a room and there are things that are in that room that don't belong. It could be an empty Amazon box. It could be a cup that you brought in that was full of water. It doesn't matter what it is. If there are things in that room that are out of place, your unconscious mind is processing every single one of those things. Why is this in this room? Does this belong in this room? What is this? And whether you have a visceral reaction to it, like, oh, it's a spider, your mind is still processing it. And we talked about decision fatigue and how much energy that consumes. And if you're trying to focus, it's alarming how when you remove all of those peripheral distractions, and they're not things that are consciously bugging you, these are unconsciously bugging you. But when you clear those away, how much more focused you are. There are actually writers, and I find this fascinating. There are writers that will actually leave their homes and they take their laptop computer and they go somewhere else. Like they'll pay for a B&B somewhere else where the distractions have been removed so they can sit down and focus. And I think that's so incredibly interesting that they would pay money to go stay somewhere else that just had the distractions removed.
Yeah, that's really important. And we all have different abilities to handle stress and different things that are happening, but you need to really understand who you are and how you respond to those situations. And our time is a little bit short, but there's an area that I would really like to focus on. They say that the last thing you say is what people will remember. And so I think this is really important. We need to learn to discipline our mind. As we started out, mind is everything, intelligence is everything. And it's one of the areas that we really need to master. And so learning how to meditate and how to control your thoughts, learning how to deep breathe and being aware of your breath and how you feel. Learn how to relax the muscles in your body. Focus on each one of the muscles individually and relax it. And if you relax your muscles and you breathe properly, it's much easier to go to sleep and to get restful sleep. There's a thing called mindful walking, where you're aware of every step that you take and you're aware of the sounds of nature around you. You're aware of the breeze blowing. You're aware of the rustling of the leaves on the trees. And you're just totally in the moment, experiencing the reality of that moment. And there's also the ability to visualize things. We talk a lot about visualizing, but actually to sit down and to close your eyes and to see yourself as a certain kind of a person, or reacting a certain way to the little black spider on the floor, whatever it might be. You learn to visualize those circumstances, and you want to visualize the circumstances as you would have them turn out. If you have a friendship, how do you want that to turn out? Visualize yourself in that friendship where you're interacting in a positive way. If you're having trouble with a relationship in your family, visualize interacting with that person in a positive way. And learn to see things as you would like to see them. And train your mind to look at things that way. Train your mind to look at positive things rather than negative things. Be aware of how you speak, because a lot of times you'll hear yourself saying, I can't do this, or I don't have room for this. There's nowhere to put this. Yes, there is. There's a way that you can do that, and there is a place for that. And you can accomplish all of those things. So talk that way. If you see something, say, I bet there's a better place for that, and I will find it. I know where that is, or I will create one. Don't say, I can't put this away because I don't have a place for it. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't remember. I can't remember where I left my keys. That's a really bad thing to say to yourself. To say, I can remember. I was aware of when I put my keys away, and so I know where they are. It will come to me in a second. Say things in a positive way, how you want them to turn out. Be aware of how you think and how you speak, because that will be sort of the intention behind how your life processes and how it turns out. So there's just so many things that we can do to discipline ourselves and to form good habits and to learn how to take something like focus and make it a skill that we excel in. I think that's really, really important to do.
Well, thank you for your concept today. And thank you for wrapping that up with, the awareness that comes with focus, because when you are aware, you have choices. I see we have a couple of questions that come in, and it looks like it's the beginning of a whole new conversation. We don't have time to answer them today, but I would like to invite you to please ask those questions in the comments below, because we will come back and we will answer those, and we will continue the dialogue and the conversation. I do want to thank you guys for joining us today. Again, we're reading from the Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn. It is part 1 of part 2, 2 volumes on the Insights and Wisdom of Omuugn, where we're talking about a whole bunch of different things that help us become a better person. So please join us again, same time, same place next week, when not only do we talk about focus, but we talk about forgiveness. All right, that's it for today. Thanks again, Omuugn, for joining us, and thank you guys for joining us.